One day I'm coming out, I'm walking with Kevin and Leo, Cam and Dame walking in the building. Dame said, you a worker now?
Yo.
You a pumper.
Yo,
you know how these niggas, yo, everybody in Rockefeller make jokes. You know how it's like, oh, this
Dame was crucial.
He pumping for Kevin Lyles. You know, Cam always want to interject and shit like that.
You know, I heard what you know, a couple people called me about what Jim said about me. And I was like, I don't understand that. And then I heard what Cam said.
You went and got a couple niggas, and I know these niggas, they my niggas too. You tell them you got a problem, they jump in the car. They don't know who you got a problem with. They get down there as Dame.
People always talk about industry secrets like they're fairy tales, but every now and then a story pops up that cracks everything open. This one, it's not just another hip-hop memory. It's the moment that shifted the way two powerful men looked at each other forever, and Jim Jones finally laid it all out in a way that hits way beyond music. See, everyone thinks Jim walked into some harmless prank that day. He didn't. He walked straight into a setup that bruised more than his pride. It shook up the balance of power inside a building where egos were already scraping the ceiling, and the way Jim tells it now, you can finally understand why he reacted the way he did, instantly, loudly, and with zero hesitation. Because what Dame Dash pulled wasn't just rude, it was a direct shot at Jim's position, his work, and everything he was building at the time. And trust me, Jim wasn't just some dude hanging around hoping to be noticed. He had real weight behind the scenes, and he was moving like someone who knew exactly what he brought to the table. To understand why that moment exploded the way it did, you gotta go back, way back, to a time when Jim Jones was running heavy plays behind closed doors. This was Def Jam era, Diplomats era, the time when the whole team was fighting to lock down their brand and protect their image like it was a crown jewel.
Dude, boy, that's why you had so much envy towards him, because you're not nobody boss in that situation.
That's right.
Leo was your boss.
That's right.
While you walked in that building with me, somebody else was your boss.
Everybody got a boss.
Rockefeller was a label, there was somebody else that was your boss.
But Dame ain't no sucker. Dame was ready to fight all three of y'all. And then when Dame ain't realized, but Dame realized the other two niggas wasn't doing it, he said, I want to fight you. You said, I don't fight. Dame said, why you got muscles? You said, I got muscles to look good. You know why I know? Because it's on tape. Did I put the tape out? Did I tell niggas, yo, put that tape out? Because Dame was stunned. Dame said, yo, get the fuck off my block. Them niggas ain't about to do nothing. Dame was in downtown on Orchard Street acting like he was in Harlem and told niggas, yo, get the fuck off my block. I told niggas, don't put that tape out, man. It ain't worth it.
You know.
And inside that world, everything mattered. Every decision, every face-to-face meeting, every move someone made in public. At the time, Cam and Jim weren't agreeing on how the brand should be shaped. There were creative disagreements, business disagreements, direction disagreements, all of it stacked on top of each other. But instead of stepping back and waiting for orders, Jim Jones was grinding harder than people realized. He wasn't just showing up to block shoots and video sets, he was pulling up to corporate tables, laying out strategies, pitching ideas, and mapping out rollouts like a full executive. And here's the part people never knew. Jim wasn't doing all that just for bragging rights. He was actually getting paid real executive money on the low. We're talking $10,000 to $15,000 every single month in quiet consulting checks. No bragging, no announcements, no spotlight, just steady cash and steady influence. He was literally shaping campaigns from the inside while everyone on the outside assumed he was just another artist tagging along. Jim says he'd walk into meetings and command the room. He'd break down marketing angles, audience behavior, radio strategy, all the things labels rely on to pull off big wins. And he wasn't doing it halfway. He was climbing on tables, pointing at boards, outlining full blueprints for rollouts. That's not casual involvement. That's executive aggression. So when Dame Dash decided to play him in front of everybody, it cut deeper than a simple joke. It wasn't just Dame messing with a friend, it was Dame publicly trying to treat someone performing at an executive level like a sidekick. And Jim wasn't having that. Not for a second. Because imagine putting in all that work, bringing in numbers, shaping campaigns, getting quiet checks from powerful people upstairs, only to have someone try to embarrass you in front of the whole building like you weren't making real moves. Anybody would snap, and Jim did. According to him, the second Dame pulled that little stunt, everything inside him shifted. The room stopped being a meeting room and turned into a line he wasn't about to let anyone cross. And by the way Jim talks about it now, you can hear that sting still sitting in his voice. Not because he's bitter, but because he finally feels free to explain why it mattered. Jim says that day made something crystal clear. Respect wasn't optional. Not with the work he was putting in, not with the numbers he was generating.
So you walked into a building where I became a big executive at and tell me what I'm doing is wrong when you doing the same thing?
Yeah.
I learned a lot there, was able to take that knowledge that I had there and moving on and end up with the record called Ballin. So the joke ended up being on them.
Not with the influence he was building, and definitely not in front of a room full of executives who were starting to see him as more than an artist. When he checked Dame Dash right then and there, it wasn't random anger. It was a man defending the position he earned. It was someone who refused to let another powerful figure undermine him in public when he knew exactly how much he was contributing behind the scenes. That's why this moment hits different. It wasn't about ego in the casual sense, and it was about identity, value, and survival in an industry built on hierarchy. Dame Dash might have thought he was cracking a joke, but Jim Jones felt him cracking at something way bigger.
But Dame ain't no sucker. Dame was ready to fight all three of y'all. And then when Dame ain't realized, but Dame realized the other two niggas wasn't doing it, he said, I want to fight you. You said, I don't fight. Dame said, why you got muscles? You said, I got muscles to look good. You know why I know? Because it's on tape. Did I put the tape out? Did I tell niggas, yo, put that tape out? Because Dame was stunned. Dame said, yo, get the fuck off my block. Them niggas ain't about to do nothing. Dame was in downtown on Orchard Street acting like he was in Harlem and told niggas, yo, get the fuck off my block. I told niggas, don't put that tape out, man. It ain't worth it.
His credibility. And once you hear Jim explain the full story, the reaction makes perfect sense. He didn't misread the room. He read the disrespect instantly and handled it instantly. It's wild how the entire vibe in a room can shift the second someone starts leveling up. You don't even have to open your mouth. Success walks in ahead of you, and suddenly people who once looked past you start reacting in ways they can't hide. That's exactly what makes Jim Jones's story so much deeper than some old school industry moment. It's a lesson wrapped in a memory, a lesson about growth, elevation, and how people really behave when you evolve into someone they never pictured you becoming. Because when Jim laid all this out, he wasn't flexing. He wasn't trying to reopen some old tension. He was just explaining the truth behind how people treated him differently once he started moving in executive spaces. And the crazy thing, Jim wasn't running around the building showing off his new title or throwing his weight around hoping somebody would bow to him. That's not how he operates.
Me and Cam wasn't agreeing on the things that they were doing at the time about diplomats, and I was like, there's no way we could be seen like that. So I made a little bit of a deck, some bullet points of what we need and shit like that. I made copies for everybody and shit. I went down there. The thing I stood on the table, gave everybody copies of the shit, Kevin Lyles and all that shit. They all went through it.
He was doing the real work, the type of work most people never even knew he was responsible for. He was stepping into conference rooms with actual plans, mapping out strategies, structuring campaigns, breaking down ideas like someone who belonged in those meetings. And even though he didn't flash it on social media or shout it in interviews, the people upstairs valued him enough to cut him those quiet consultant checks. Those checks weren't some bonus. They were recognition. They were respect. But here's where things get tricky. Sometimes when you start creating value, the same people who once hyped you up suddenly look uncomfortable. It's not because you changed. It's because your growth holds up a mirror they weren't ready to see. And that's what made Dame Dash's little joke hit so differently that day. It wasn't really about Jim at all. Not at its core.
That was true. People ask me, it's been brought up. Big Face Gary, he was appalled, but he was like, why didn't you ever tell us? Why didn't you ever tell us that he came to the block with his boys and you had to almost get into an altercation? And it was really like, when someone that I consider family, I've never been in a situation where someone that I consider family actually tried to have somebody physically put their hands on me. It blew my mind, the level of disrespect. It was so un-Harlem that it was embarrassing. That one of the ones that I raised would actually try to have me hurt.
It was about what Jim represented in that moment. He wasn't just an artist in the hallway anymore. He was someone shaping major decisions, someone stepping into a lane most people didn't think he would ever enter, someone who proved he could sit in rooms that weren't originally built for him. When Jim said that Dame's comment wasn't meant as a playful jab, he meant it. There was something underneath it, something that felt like insecurity wrapped in humor. People do that all the time. Instead of expressing how surprised they are at your growth, instead of admitting they didn't expect you to climb so fast, they'll throw a joke out there trying to cover up whatever they're really feeling. It's easier to make light of someone's wins than to admit you underestimated them. And the real message Jim was sending, you can't let that type of energy break your stride. He learned the hard way that not everybody is built to clap for you when your blessings start landing. Some folks will laugh just to make themselves feel taller. Some will act like your accomplishments aren't serious. Some will pretend not to see your progress at all, even when your impact is right in their face.
And one of the things that fucked me up in that position where I kind of left that was one day, and we just talking stories. One day I'm coming out, I'm walking with Kevin and Leor, Cam and Dame walking in the building. Dame said, you a worker now?
Yo.
You a pumper.
Yo,
you know how these niggas, you know, everybody in Rockefeller make jokes. You know how it's like, oh, this nigga's
Dame
a pumper.
was crucial.
He pumping for Kevin Lyles. You know, Cam always want to interject and shit like that. And I was on fire, bro. That shit really bent me in a different position. Like I was like,
nigga, I ain't doing this shit no more.
But no, it wasn't that. I was more mad at what they did. You heard? Because you undermine what I got going on. They didn't respect the position I had, but maybe they did, but they knew they could never be in that position of where I was going. So they did some shit to deter me from where I was actually heading.
You
understand what I'm saying?
You know, I always tell niggas that you gotta watch jokes.
But the funny thing about success is that it doesn't need applause to be real. The numbers don't lie, the work speaks for itself. People in the right rooms know who brings value. Jim wasn't confused about why Dame reacted the way he did. Sometimes the people closest to you have the hardest time accepting that you're evolving beyond the version of you they're comfortable with. They remember who you were, not who you're becoming. And growth, real growth, challenges their sense of control, their sense of status, and sometimes even their sense of identity. Jim just happened to be in a place where his personal elevation shook the room more than he expected, but what he took from that moment is what hits the deepest. You have to stand firm in your lane, even when the people around you don't understand your purpose yet. You can't shrink yourself to make anyone else comfortable. If your blessing makes someone uneasy, that's something they need to unpack, not you. Jim's story is bigger than the Rockefeller era, bigger than one joke, bigger than one argument. It's about what happens when someone grows in silence and then shows up so strong the room can't process it. People reveal themselves when your success walks in before you do, and Jim learned exactly who was ready for his evolution and who wasn't. When people talk about major labels, most don't realize how much power sits behind those office doors. Your average A&R at a big label is juggling budgets that stretch into the tens of millions every single year. That's real leverage, real decision-making weight. So picture the shift when Jim Jones stepped into that same space, not as an artist chasing approval, but as an executive with genuine influence. That changed the entire dynamic.
I'm thinking I'm lit like, oh, I'm about to get a nice deal over here. I bet. So I go over there. He like, yo, bro, I know you're doing music, but that's not my concern. You way smarter than music. I know how to make you super duper rich. I'm like, well, he like, I want you to be an executive here. He like, not just any executive. It's going to be Leor, myself, and then you. Everybody else in this, all of these buildings, Atlantic, everybody, Todd Moskowitz, Joey Ai, they all work for you in that capacity. This is a very, very important job, but I need you next to me because I seen what you could do. This is what Kevin telling me and shit like that. So that's how I end up being the A&R director for Warner Music Group.
Man,
not for the group, not for Warner Rec, for everything. Was Atlantic under there, was all the labels, so that was my position.
It put him in rooms where choices shaped careers, marketing plans, and full-on business directions. But what stands out most is how he handled the pressure of that role. Because the moment Dame Dash tried to minimize him publicly, Jim could have snapped back hard. He could have used his new position to clap back, to embarrass Dame, to expose the insecurity behind that joke. A lot of people would have fired off instantly, especially someone with something to prove, but Jim didn't do that, and that's where the story shifts from industry gossip to a real lesson. Instead of reacting, he took the hit silently. He swallowed the sting and let it sit with him. It bothered him, sure. Anyone in his position would have felt that burn, But instead of turning it into a war, Jim flipped it into growth. He paid attention. He studied the room. He paid close attention to how people responded to his presence. And instead of letting the moment derail him, he figured out how to operate with even more intention. That's the difference between someone chasing status and someone building longevity. Jim understood something a lot of people never learn. In the entertainment world, everything feels personal, but the business rarely is. Emotions get tangled up in deals, friendships mix with pressure, egos collide with expectations, and still, you have to separate the work from the noise. Jim handled that moment like someone who understood that leadership isn't about proving yourself out loud. It's about moving smart, thinking long-term, and refusing to let temporary feelings sabotage permanent opportunities. But the wildest part? Life has a strange way of circling back around. Because after that whole situation, Jim walked away from the executive seat. He left that building, stepped right back into artist mode, and ended up dropping Ballin, a record that didn't just chart, it took over.
And for what? You know, what could have been done in that moment that you would physically want your man or someone that kind of helped you to get humiliated? Because that's all that would have been if somebody would have came on my block, or rather to my art gallery, it was my art gallery, and put their hands on me in front of my girl. So there was just no way that was going to happen without some degree of a fight. But again, what broke my heart was I felt like I raised everybody better than that, you know.
That song didn't feel like a regular release. It felt like a victory lap, like the universe reminding him that nobody can block what's meant for you. Ballin' became a national anthem of energy, momentum, and celebration. The whole country was shouting that hook. It was impossible to escape. Think about that for a moment. Someone tried to make him feel small in a meeting, and not long after, he delivered one of the biggest songs of the era. That's not a coincidence. That's a reminder that your path stays your path. Even when someone tries to steer you off it, what's for you will always find you again, sometimes louder than ever. Jim didn't need revenge. He didn't need to go back and confront anyone. The success spoke for itself, and it spoke loudly. But that's why his story hits deeper than industry politics. It's about resilience. It's about knowing your worth even when someone else tries to minimize it. It's about understanding that the world won't always applaud when you rise, but that doesn't stop the rise from happening. Jim's growth wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't rooted in ego. It was rooted in self-awareness, discipline, and the kind of maturity that most people in power never learn. He took a moment designed to shake him and turned it into fuel that carried him to one of the biggest records of his career. And in the end, life validated him in a way no argument ever could. Moments like Jim Jones's story always remind me that timing has a way of revealing everything. What looked like a joke that day ended up flipping right back on the people who thought he didn't deserve that executive seat. Instead of letting that disrespect slow him down, Jim used it like fuel and turned it into momentum that carried him even further than anyone expected. It's almost like life stepped in and said, "Watch this." And here's where things get interesting. And when someone rises into a new position, the people around them start showing their real cards. Some clap, some get quiet, and some throw those little jokes that sting more than they admit. Jim walking into that executive role shifted the energy in the room long before he said a word, and that reaction told him everything he needed to know. It wasn't the title that shook people, it was the growth. It was the fact that he leveled up in a way nobody predicted. And when someone evolves like that, you start seeing who truly respects the work and who was only comfortable with you staying in the same place. What makes Jim's story stand out is how clear the message is without him ever having to spell it out. Some folks pretend they're being playful, but we all know there's a fine line between teasing and masking jealousy. And when someone's success hits a little too close to home, those jokes start sounding like confessions. Jim didn't lash out or expose anybody. He didn't need to. Life did it for him, because when he stepped away from that building and dropped one of the biggest records of the decade, everybody who doubted him had to sit with the fact that he rose even higher than before. That's what poetic timing looks like. That's what it means when your purpose is bigger than people's opinions. So it makes you think, did Jim stepping into that executive lane truly change how people saw him? Or did it simply reveal what they had been feeling all along? And another question. When people make those harmless jokes, do they really mean no harm, or are they hiding something deeper behind the smile? Sometimes humor is just a mask for the truth people don't want to say out loud. Jim's journey shows exactly why you can't let anyone else's discomfort dim your shine. Growth will always trigger something in somebody, but as long as you know who you are, their reactions won't stop your elevation. If anything, they help define it. And that right there is the power of staying aligned with your own path. Before you go, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on the next story. And don't forget to check out the video popping up on your screen. There's even more wild celebrity drama waiting for you there. See you on the next one.